Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's Scrutiny Board meeting of the Children and Families Directorate. One or two new faces this morning, which we'll find out as we go around. We do have something before the meeting actually starts today, but I think if we just start with introductions, I think. My name is Billy Flynn. I'm the chair of the Scrutiny Board. And the meeting is being webcast for members of the public who weren't able to be here today. And as is usual, if we go from my left.
Good morning, Councillor Ellen Thompson, Guiseley Rawdon Ward, and I'm here as a substitute today. Thank you.
Good morning, Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood and new board member.
Tony Britton, representing the Roman Catholic Diocese of Leeds.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Karen Renshaw, representing Owsley and Robin Hood.
Morning, Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Andy Rowntree. I represent Kirkstall on the council. I'm here as a substitute member today.
Morning, everyone. I'm Councillor David Jenkins, representing Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Killamanakan, representing Bermontoft and Richmond Hill.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Oliver Edwards, representing Guiseley and Rawdon Wards.
Good morning, Councillor Helen Hayden, Executive Member for Children and Families.
Good morning, Jade Lamb. I'm the Interim Chief Officer for Social Work and Family Health.
Good morning, Rebecca McCormack, Chief Officer for Education.
Morning, Miriam Huck, Interim Strategic Lead for SEND and Chief Officer for SEND.
Good morning, I'm Lucy McCauley, Head of Finance, supporting children and families.
Good morning, everyone. Ben Finley, Interim Deputy Director for Children's Social Care.
Morning, Kate Blacker, co-opted member.
Good morning, Shanaz Gold, Third Sector Rep for Young Lives Leeds.
Maria Adams, Leeds Parent Carer Forum.
Good morning, Councillor Tim Goodall, representing Headley and Hyde Park.
Good morning, everybody. Ryan Stevenson, representing Harewood.
Morning, Councillor Rick Downs, representing Otley and Yeadon.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you all very much indeed. Just one piece of very sad news at the start of the meeting. One of our colleagues, Mahalia France-Mer, passed away between the last meeting and this one. A lovely lady. And I'd like, if we could just stand for a few moments to hold her memory. Thank you. And just before we get into the meeting, Councillor Hayden, who is a close friend of Mahalia, would like to say a few words in memory. Helen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this opportunity. We're not going to get many opportunities to speak publicly about Mahalia, so I really, really appreciate it. Councillor France-Mer was my care leavers champion, and she was a brilliant champion for people who are young people who are care experienced. There were many examples, and a theme of what I'm going to say is just how fierce an advocate she was for anybody who had vulnerabilities, who suffered injustice and who needed care, and they got it from Mahalia. So, bizarrely, there was a message sent by one of our wonderful officers to the MICE team to ask how much money had been collected. This was on the 16th of December for the Care Leavers Christmas dinner. And the answer came into my inbox last Tuesday on the day that she died. We'd sent out an email together, and then I think Mahalia sent out several emails later, because she knew how to advocate, she knew how to nag. But our wonderful colleagues, many of them sitting around this table, it was a total of over £4,000 for our Care Leavers Christmas dinner. So I've yet to hear how it went, but she always went on Christmas Day. She had, 4 children of her own, but she always went to the Care Leavers Christmas dinner every year. And that advocacy went on in this board as well. I've seen it said on Facebook by a lovely post by one of our opposition colleagues that she transcended party politics. She didn't. She was fiercely party political. She was very political, and he's right in saying that, because she saw everybody as a person. She saw everybody, she treated everybody with respect, kindness. She was interested in their lives, interested in them as people. She saw them as people and she cared about them. It didn't matter who you were. And that went as chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. And she came to me a few years ago for some advice, because a member that's not in this room and was not behaving properly, wanting the board to do something, wasn't on the board, but and the way they were speaking to officers, she could not stand. And we have brilliant officers on this council, that we could do nothing on this council without our brilliant officers. That's not to say that we don't have difficult conversations. I'm not a pushover, and neither was Mahalia, but you do it respectfully and you do it in private. And but she dealt with this situation. I gave her advice. I don't know whether it was any good, but the next full council, when she got to speak about the committee, I very much knew what she was talking about when she talked about people behaving properly and behaving with respect and speaking to people with respect. Yesterday was Holocaust Memorial Day, and her advocacy for social justice was very evident in her work for Srebrenica and the Holocaust, the genocide that happened there. And that's why I'm wearing, because she sourced these for us, these flowers for us, for the anniversary. And Councillor Hannon spoke very well about it. And I wear it with my gift from the Kosovan ambassador because they're both made by women, and it tends to be women and children in conflicts that suffer the most. This is by women who lost their husbands, fathers, brothers, cousins in the genocide, and this was made by women who suffered sexual violence in the Kosovan conflict. And I'm determined to carry on, her work, not just for children and families, but for children all who suffer injustice, and women all around the world, well, anybody. Well, she was a fierce advocate. She was as a mother, as a wife, as a friend. She was intelligent in every sense. She knew when she was struggling once when talking about care leavers in a meeting, and all I could do was look at her and stare like weirdly at her. But she sent me a text saying, "Thank you for your kind eyes," so she could tell what I was saying to her just through my eyes. She was incredibly intelligent. And like I say, a fierce advocate. I'm going to miss her text messages in this meeting. I can't tell you what they said. But they were always very supportive of me, and in full council as well. And I remember the one, and I can tell you a little bit about it, from last July, and I was reading it last week, and it starts Queen, and it ends with "We've got you." And that's what I always felt, and I think lots of us felt from Mahalia, that she had us, that she had our backs and she was there for us. But I want to finish on the concept of joy, because she was a joyful person and she spread joy and she was happy, and everybody was happy around her. And recent conversation a couple of months ago, when she had me crying with laughter, and she set me a challenge, a thing that we were laughing at. So if you see me coming to a meeting like this, I couldn't do it today, but not being as smart as I normally am and wearing a certain hoodie, don't judge too harshly. My friend set me a challenge and I'm having a laugh with my mate. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. She was a really, really nice lady. Just moving on to the business of the day now, I'd like to welcome in particular Pete Thorpe, who's the Interim Director of Children's and Families. Nice to see you today. Whether you'll be happy enough by the end of the meeting, of course, is another matter, Pete. But we'll move on anyway. My usual rejoinder, please, if you could, when you're actually speaking, could you bring the microphone as close as you can to where you are, rather than leave it at the edge of the table. It is quite difficult to hear at this end, so please bear that in mind. Rob, would you like to go through items 1 to 5?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The usual procedural items we consider at each board. Item 1 is appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents, and we have no appeals today, Chair. Item 2 is any items for exclusion of the press and public, and there are no such items on today's agenda. Item 3 is late items of business, and there are no late items of business today. Item 4 is declarations of interests, and I will briefly pause to allow any elected members to declare any under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. I shall take silence as none. Item 5 is apologies, Chair, and we have apologies from Councillor Heselwood with Councillor Rowntree attending as a sub, and Councillor Lennox with Councillor Thompson attending as sub. We also have apologies from some of our co-opted members, Andrew Graham, Helen Bellamy, Anas Kittu and Nick Tones. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed, Rob. Moving on to item number 6, which is the minutes of the last meeting on the 25th of November. It's page 7 of your packs. I'll just go through it page by page as I normally do. We do have one matter rising, which is from minute 62 of the minutes, which we'll talk about at the end of this particular session here. Does anyone have any comments on page 7? It's page 7 is the first page of the minutes.
I'm down twice. I'm down as a councillor and as a co-operative member.
Oh. I will correct that, Tony. My apologies.
Sorry about that. Right, onto the minutes here. The first page is on page 7. So does anyone have any comments on page 7? On page 8? On page 9? On page 10? On page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, and finally page 16. Just before we move on to the item that I mentioned earlier, does anybody have any other items they'd like to raise from the minutes?
Thank you. It's related, I think, to the one we're going to mention anyway, but I just want to check. So the penultimate paragraph on page 9 says, on notifications to elected members of Ombudsman reports, a member asked about why members were not informed sooner about the Ombudsman case. It was agreed that this would be provided outside the meeting as the information is not to hand. I believe there is an explanation for that, but for why it hasn't happened yet, but it hasn't happened yet.
Thank you very much indeed. Rob, would you like to come on?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Goodall. Two elements to that. I think the query is around the particular case that we were discussing, which I think you raised that comment that you've just read out there, and I will do a further chase on that. Also, under the recommendations, there is a request that there's a change in how members are informed of Ombudsman reports, and that's a little bit more complex because some of it features within the council's constitution. So there are various protocols that reference ombudsman reports and how the authority deals with them. But I am on with that. I have spoken with senior colleagues, and it is something that I will hope to resolve for the next meeting, which is approximately 3 weeks away. So I'll have something more substantive on that, and I will do the chase, Councillor Goodall, on that particular, the one that relates to the item that we took. Thank you.
Nothing's ever easy. We assumed it was going to be a relatively simple sort of task to ensure that members were advised of this kind of report in future, but of course, once you get into the complexity of these things, it's not quite as simple as it might appear. So are you happy with the doing this, Councillor Goodall? Thank you very much indeed. Any further comments on the minutes? No? Okay. We move on to item number 7, which is financial health monitoring for the current year, 25-26. Councillor Hayden, would you like to kick us off on this one?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the month 7 financial position for services within the board's remit. As members will see, children and families continue to face significant pressure, driven largely by demand-led budgets. Important work is underway to address these pressures, including the Coming Home to Leeds programme with Newton Consulting, which is already having a positive impact on reducing the number of children in external residential placements and providing our trajectory against our sufficiency model. Officers can take members through the month 7 position in more detail, including the dashboard and the sufficiency update, and then we can go to questions. So I will leave it there. And I don't know whether Lucy or wants to say something?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll start by just giving an overview in terms of the figures with a particular reference to the Children's and Families position. So overall, at the end of month 7, which was the end of October, the authority as a whole is projecting an overspend of 28.02 million, which is 4.2% of the total 25-26 budget. Within that, specifically against Children's and Families are projecting an overspend of 31.3 million. The key pressures within that overspend in the main relate to the children looked after budgets, which equate to 23.5 million of that 31 million. So within that, external residential placements are projecting an overspend of 14.6 million, supported accommodation an overspend of 6.2 million, and IFA placements 3.4 million. In addition to the CLA pressures, we're also projecting pressures against the transport budgets of 1.14 million, children's centres of 1.1 million, and education psychologists of 1.5 million. This position is actually an increase of 2.5 million since the previous month, the month 6 position, which was reported. In terms of the budget action plans included within this position, you may recall that Children's Families had total budget action plans of 37.3 million in 25-26. As at month 7, it is assumed that 27.1 of these will not be delivered, so just 10.2 will be delivered in 25-26. Just quickly reference the dedicated schools grant position as well. So the DSG budget for 25-26 assumed a deficit in year budget of 32.2 million. As at month 7, we are projecting an in-year budget deficit of 24.3 million. The majority of that pressure sits within the high needs block. So as at the end of 25-26, we're projecting a total DSG deficit to carry forward of 37.8 million. That deficit is still allowed within the contents of the statutory override. So that's ring-fenced outside the main authority's budget. I think Ben was going to go into some more detail behind those figures.
Thank you, Chair. So just to sort of take colleagues through some of the individual line items there and provide some context in terms of what we're doing, you'll see that the largest area of overspend is our external placement costs. We've got, as you are aware from previous scrutiny meetings, a coherent, comprehensive programme that's working hard to bring those children back to care in Leeds, to provide care for them that's appropriate to meet their needs, and to use our own estate and to support those young people in making sensible transitions into the next phase of their care through supported accommodation, through return to family, through going to live with connected people or kinship carers. So that programme is on track. It's delivering against the targets we've set for it, and we're reassured that it's going to continue to do so. We understand the trajectory it's taking and where it will end up at the moment. You'll see additional placement costs there in terms of IFA placements. That's fostering placements with independent fostering agencies. We use those as a direct alternative to residential, and they provide a good standard of care for young people. We are using them also because we don't have as many of our own foster carers as we are ambitious to have. There continues to be a significant piece of work going on in terms of recruitment of new foster carers. There are a number of programs planned for this calendar year that we think will have a positive impact on that and that are very close to coming into fruition. Colleagues will be aware of the Reconnections foster carer programme, which is specifically about foster care placements for children currently living in residential care. I'm pleased to say that that continues to make progress. We have a number of people that we're in the process of assessing and looking to match young people with them and to plan for young people to go and live with them. So we're pleased about the progress that that's making. You'll see that supported accommodation is also an area of pressure. That's accommodation for young people aged 16, 17 who are able to live without care requirements, who need support as they move into being young adults. That's an area that we continue to work with a small number of providers on to make sure that we've got the right core offer. It also reflects some of the care and support that we provide to young people aged 18 and above, so care leavers. We think we've got some more work to do there in terms of some of the commissioning approaches we're taking, and we have plans to address that. I'm very pleased to say that the Kirkstall Apartments project is full and has been since before Christmas. So that went from opening in mid-September to 44 young people residing there over about a 10-week period, which is excellent progress, and it continues to be a really solid place and meeting the needs of those young people really effectively. And just finally, on the secure welfare area, we have made less use of secure provision outside of Leeds. We obviously run our own secure unit, so we use that where we can because it helps us with our resettlement and aftercare from that setting. We've made less use of that, and we've also this year made significantly less use of remand into custody beds, which we pay for. And that's down by about 50% this year, which is really positive. Significantly less young people being remanded into custody by the courts. Colleagues will also be aware that we have a specific programme going on there that's in partnership with the Ministry of Justice, with Bradford, Calderdale and Wakefield councils to develop more capacity in that area to meet the needs of those young people who would otherwise be remanded into custody, and that will be contributing next year into a more positive savings position. So I guess what I wanted to provide colleagues with was just some reassurance that those areas of principal overspend do have very clear action plans. I can talk in more detail about them. We are on track with those action plans, and we're confident that we're going to get to where we plan to be at the end of the year by the end of the year.
Thanks very much indeed, Ben. And Lucy, just before we move on to questions and sort of comments, you covered a huge amount there, obviously, and we've got more to come with the next sort of 3 years budgets. The biggest problem, I think we'll all agree, is the children looked after external placements. And I know there have been significant improvements, or certainly significant reductions in the number of children who are being cared for externally already this year, and you're hoping, I think, for a significant reduction before the end of the year as well. We heard on Monday that the difference between the cost of an external placement and internal placement was £4,000 savings as you bring him in. I wondered about the capacity of Leeds to actually look after. I think you're looking for 130 by the end of the current year. That's a significant number, and it hasn't been going down over sort of recent years or whatever. I just wonder if you could just talk about the capacity and where the children are likely to be going.
Thank you, Chair. So we intend to get to 130 by the 31st of March. That's from a figure in late summer of around 158. So that in itself is a challenge, but we're on track to meet that, and I can provide reassurance on that. We then have plans to get to 90 by the end of the next financial year, and we have plans in place to meet that as well. You asked about our internal sufficiency. We've been growing our internal capacity over the last couple of years. We will have brought on into functioning, or be very close to, because there are some things that are not quite in our control, by the end of this financial year, 17 new children's homes offering around 40 beds of additional capacity. I'm really pleased to be able to share with colleagues that our homes are running at a really high occupancy rate. So we're typically seeing occupancy of 3 out of 4 beds occupied at all times, and most homes moving into the 4th bed being occupied. So we've been through a process over the last few weeks associated with the Coming Home to Leeds programme of young people who are ready to move from our homes, moving into supported accommodation. We're now matching young people in to live in our homes and making sure that we've got the right children going to the right care. So where we are is we're moving to an occupancy target of around 90% for our internal homes, and I'm confident we'll get there. We have traditionally been in that place in terms of how we've utilised the estate we have. That will, as we project, as children grow and age and move through the system, and as we bring more of our own capacity on and make use of our own capacity, alive with work around reunification and supporting children to go and live with their own family where it's safe and in their interest to do so, we think we've got a roadmap that gets us to a significantly reduced number of external residential placements. The broader context is the number of children we look after. And I'm pleased to be able to say that that is also going in the right direction. So that's probably the starting point to say that are we working with the right number of young people? We've seen a small reduction over the last few weeks in those numbers. We think that we'll continue to see that happen. We have the Family First programme starting to come into existence in the next financial year. That will provide us with additional services and support to support families to care for their own children. So we should be seeing a reduction in overall demand into the system, which in turn will follow through into a reduction in demand for particular types of placement. And our ambition is always that children live with families. So whether that's a fostering family that we provide, or a fostering family that's provided by an agency, or we support them with their own family with a package of support, and there are some really imaginative and creative packages of support being made available to families to enable that to happen, that will in time take demand out of our external placements budget, and we're confident that we can get to some of the numbers we need to get to.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Ben. I've got one or two questions about demand, but it'll be for next year and the following 2 years. We can cover that in the sort of next item. Do any members have any questions or comments for any of the speakers this morning? Are you all happy with the... Okay. Councillor Edwards, yes. So
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Ben. You did partly answer one of my questions, but I wanted to pick up on... I've got two questions. So the first one is about the external placements. So on page 18, looking at the increase, and I wondered if you could provide us with a bit more backgrounds as to why that is. So particularly in terms of conversations with our residents, if one of our residents were looking at that figure, going up from 12.05 million to 14.60 million, what are the reasons for that increasing in cost? Is it because of, is it internal factors, is it external factors? It'd be quite helpful to understand a bit more about the background to that. And in terms of the work that's being done around increasing in-house residential provision, increasing fostering provision, I know these are things we've talked about quite a bit in the past. I think there's some fantastic work that's happening there. I know how hard your team works on this. And I think the Coming Home to Leeds strategy is an interesting one. I think it's a worthwhile one. What would you see as being the measure of success for that? So when we're looking at this as a committee, how are you measuring success of that programme, and what does success look like to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I think just in terms of the reasons for the increase in cost, there's a number of factors that have driven the overall budgetary position. The period that's being reported to saw a small increase in some of the numbers of young people coming into care. It saw an increase in some of the challenging behaviours, and that translates through into higher cost per child. And we also, in the same period, see some of the in-year price increases working their way through from providers. So it's a mixture of factors. It's more demand, it's higher cost per unit of demand, as well as some of the more normal inflationary pressures that work their way through. So it's a broad range for that increase of about 2.5 million in that period. In terms of how we would regard the Coming Home to Leeds work as being successful, it always starts with the experience of an individual child. So the first criterion of success is that children are supported to achieve their potential, to do really well, to have the things that matter to them in their lives, and to be cared for in a really positive and effective way, and in a way that promotes their development and their well-being. But the second order of success is actually that the numbers start to come down in terms of where we're looking after children. So I've mentioned that we have a clear measure of success for the end of this financial year and for the next financial year, and we have a series of marker points along the year where we intend to get to. So I think the measure of success is firstly the outcomes for children, and is secondly that we deliver the budgetary package that aligns that we've agreed to do.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Edwards? Yes. Okay, Councillor Hayden, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to emphasise it, because when you talk about success with children and what's a measure of success, and yeah, the finances are extremely important, but actually, as Ben mentioned, it's the outcomes for children, and which are so much better if they're in a family setting. And if they're back in Leeds when it's safe. So the outcomes are but much more difficult to measure. And that's a principal reason we're doing this. Yes, we don't want the money is important, but actually using external, especially when they're out of Leeds and far away, is not always. Sometimes it is. It's the best thing, but not most of the time. That's not, but they need to be back here with us, with their communities, with their families. And that, to me, is a measure of success, but that's far harder to actually put into a report.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Rowntree, you started to move your hand. Did you want to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will come in if I may. I think this is probably one for Ben. Thanks for your comments there, and I'll just start by saying, coming home to Leeds and totally support that. It's quite obviously the right strategy and the right direction. One thing that's troubling me slightly, this is my third year serving on the council, and it seems like each year up to present, as a part of the budget process, there is an in-year overspend reported on the cost of placements. Now, quite appreciate that some of these things are demand fluctuations. I'm just wondering that if this happens every year, we ought to know that it's coming, and it seems that I'm sure there is an expectation of this, but our forecasts and predictions don't match it. And looking sort of at the forward projections, it seems that the investment in in-house provision is going to pay off, and we're going to start to see the benefits from that soon. My worry with this is that if we're having this much trouble with forecasts, and there are external factors that we maybe can't influence, how confident are we that what we're doing at this stage is going to solve the problem going forward?
Thank you. I mean, it's absolutely vital that we are giving really robust and clear expectations about how we see demand coming through, and we've worked really hard this year to be very, very clear in how we're working out our numbers and projections for that. I think it's also important to note that we've had support from Newton Consulting in some of our work to provide assurance to colleagues within the council and to yourselves that the projections that are being made are appropriate. One of the challenges we have is, as you say, it's a demand-led budget, so we can't not provide a service when a service is needed. And the real challenge for us in that has been that we've typically not had the internal capacity to moderate the fluctuations in demand. And once we make a decision for a child to go and live somewhere, if they start to settle there, we really need to work with the child there. We can't say, oh, sorry, we're going to stop that now. We're going to move you back because it suits us to do that, because they've started to build relationships, they've started to go to school. So when we don't have the capacity at the point we need it, and we then go into the market and we place somebody because we can't control that fluctuation in demand, we're then setting a position for the medium or long term, and we've got to work in quite a planned and careful way to move away from it. What's important about the development of our own estate and our own capacity is it's giving us much more ability to control those very short-term pressures on us. So as an example, we have a young person that we've looked after in the last couple of weeks who, because we had internal capacity, we could look after them in Leeds, we could hold them in Leeds, we could provide the care and start to help them start to manage their behaviour and move into being in a better position, and that's then helped us make a more planned and calmer placing decision for them because we've not had to do it at under real pressure at real pace. And what that then means is we're going into the market in a more controlled way. We're in a stronger position. So the development of our own assets and our own estate is a critical part of us being able to be a stronger player in the market. That will help us control our exposure to price, to demand, and to some of the placement types that we would go with. So it's a mixture of factors. But I do take your point about the confidence in the figures. I appreciate that I'm not speaking from a position of strength with that. All I can say is that we're very committed to being really robust in our projections and being really very direct in terms of what we think we can do and what we think we can achieve. And what I would end by saying is that we are on track to hit the targets that we have agreed with colleagues, and we're talking to you. So we are on track for the 130 figure at the end of the financial year. We understand the journey to the 90 in the next financial year. The only caveat with it is that if events take place that are out of our control, it may have an impact on that. But we are in a better position to mitigate those unforeseen events and unplanned events.
There's also sorry, just to before you come back, Councillor Rowntree, there's also all the other work that goes on that Ben talked about earlier, in youth justice, in the youth justice area, in Family First, all that early help that stops those crises, stop it reaching crisis point. So it's not just, but the work around our own estate and us having capacity, that takes time, and we were making those decisions a couple of years ago, but it takes time to buy the houses, to get them through, to get them right, to staff them properly, to have those staff trained, and then to match. And as Ben said, when you've got children who are settled somewhere else because of it takes an awful long time, and quite rightly, to bring them back into our own estate or back to Leeds, because these are people we're dealing with, and I know we're in a finance paper, but these are people, very, very vulnerable people, and we have to get it right, not just for us, but especially for them. So that all takes time. But all that work that is going around building resilience and building resilience in our families, that is having an effect, because what we're seeing, and Ben's talked about it, is not only the reduction in coming home to Leeds, but what's just as important and actually having as big of effect, but you can't see it on the figures, is and those figures coming down, is the fact there's no children going out of Leeds, and again, that's hard to make tangible. It's hard to see, because we don't know what would have happened in those situations. We can guess what would have happened based on what we knew last year or the year before, but it's much harder, to quantify.
Councillor Rowntree, are you happy?
Thanks, that's reassuring.
Thanks very much. I think we slipped into next year's budget, actually, rather than the current year's budget. We're talking about this year's financial health. It's part and parcel. It's one of the issues I want to talk about myself, because of the issues we had this year on this year's sort of budget. We'll come on to that on the next sort of item, but thanks very much indeed. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Not sure if this will apply to that as well, but I'll just ask a question, see where we get to. Yeah, I'm a new board member, so this may have been addressed in previous meetings. Apologies for everyone if that's the case. But in the report, it mentions the supply of in-house foster care being an important issue, and you talked a little bit about that you've got a plan to increase that. I just wondered what that looked like. Is that sort of a communications plan, or is it sounds like there's been a drop in the number of people who are able to provide foster care. So does the plan address the causes of that drop, and what are they? And I guess relatedly, I didn't catch what the time frame is for the delivery of that plan, and when is it sort of designed to make a difference to our finances? Is it sort of next year's budget, or when's the payoff of that factored in for?
Thank you. I think probably important context to say that a lot of local authority and private fostering agencies are seeing the same pattern of a reduction in the overall availability of foster placements, and that's partly what drives some of the pressure into the external market, into the external residential market, because the availability of fostering placements, whether it's ours or IFA placements, is overall a smaller proportion of what's available in terms of meeting the needs of children. So there's a broader context in terms of recruitment and attraction of foster carers. There's, I think, we are, though, within that context, and having said that, performing well in relation to our peers, both as local authorities and in terms of private agency recruitment. So we are doing better than the comparator group, if you like. But what we're not confident is that we're doing well enough, and that's really what we're trying to focus on. Is the growth needs to be faster to meet our needs, even though in terms of the context of the sector, the growth is better than sector average and better than the normal performance. The process of recruitment and the recruitment plan is set for the next 12 months. It will seek to recruit as many carers as we can. There's no upper ceiling in terms of we want this number and that's sufficient. We want to increase significantly, and I would be absolutely thrilled if we could get to a position where we had more foster carers than we had demand for. That's ultimately the objective we want to get to. That's a significant number. Within our projections for next year, we do have clear proposals in terms of the number of fostering placements we will use, and that's part of what we need to manage operationally, is to make sure that we're managing the budget overall, so that if we don't see that increase, we're managing the cost and the care of young people in other types of settings that are just as effective, and we hold the budget together. In terms of the recruitment approach, it's taking a number of different strands. It's partly trying to do more of what we've done typically, which is finding ways to talk to people about becoming foster carers, talking about what foster carer role involves, talking about the different types of foster care. But we also recognise there's an underlying economic model for fostering in terms of how foster carers are remunerated and how they're supported financially, and there's an underlying model in terms of practice support and practice care, if you like. So we're looking at both of those as well and trying to rethink in a more fundamental way, have we got the proposition into the market right? So not only is we're going to do more of what we're doing because it's working to some extent, the stretch is to try to make the model, is to try to rethink the model. And you can see some evidence of that with the Reconnections foster carer, where we've taken a very different model of both practice support and financial support for a carer, but targeting it at a very specific cohort of young people. And we're going to do more of trying to understand how we differentiate the model to attract different types of people in. Part of our recruitment and marketing campaign is going to be much more segmented on particular people in particular stages of life, people with particular backgrounds or particular approaches, and we're trying to think as intelligently as possible about who might be a good foster carer, who might want to be a foster carer, what would the characteristics of somebody be who says, actually, I want to give that a go. And we're going to get into some of the detail of that. It is something where we are in a competition with a significant number of companies. They are able to deploy significant amounts of money into their marketing approaches. So I don't necessarily want to get into too much detail because I don't want to talk about it too publicly, but I'd be happy to get into the detail of it specifically privately if that was helpful.
Can I also just say that I'm looking around my colleagues around the table and across the council to help us with this. Councillor Ritchie is one example of a real advocate for fostering. We have a number, and have had a number of councillors who are also foster carers, including Councillor Francis so kind of reps of foster carers will be coming to your areas, sometimes at the same time as your surgeries and things like that. We'd very much appreciate your support, and if you could through all your channels promote Fostering for Leeds. So I will be getting in touch about how colleagues can help us in that. So thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson.
Just a really quick follow-up. Certainly, I'd be very, very happy to support that in my ward as much as I can, communicating and linking in with groups and things. I think it's really important. I think what I'm hearing is, it's partly about targeting and communications, and then partly about maybe thinking about more the circumstances of different carers and what support they need and so on, and tailoring that. So that it sounds like there are going to be some changes in for the money involved and the support involved, but it's commercially sensitive, so you don't want to go into too much detail of that.
Kate.
Thank you. I think it's been touched upon already a little bit in terms of what I wanted to ask about the plan, obviously, to increase capacity in Leeds. But just for my sort of past experience and knowledge of external placements, I think what I've often come across is their ability to provide a really multidisciplinary approach, and it was touched upon, a bespoke sort of package or offer for those children who obviously have really quite challenging needs. So I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that, because I think you've mentioned not only obviously the estate, the actual physical buildings and the beds and staffing, but is there something about that model of external placements and to a lesser extent IFAs that is more difficult for the local authority to replicate in terms of upskilling staff and finding the staff with the necessary expertise? And is that part of the plan in terms of looking at that as a specific focus to ensure that not only do you have the capacity, both in relation to sort of the physical buildings and the beds, but also like the right staff? Because obviously, whilst it's absolutely right that we bring children back to Leeds in the majority of cases, clearly that's got to be in the children's best interests. It's also really, really important, obviously, that those placements then are successful and endure for those children who will have already experienced a lot of trauma and disruption in their lives. So I just wanted to ask a little bit more in terms of the detail around specifically like the staffing and that expertise and that bespoke package to ensure that those children's needs are actually being like fully met.
Thank you. I think it's a really good point that it's not just about providing places for children to live, it's about providing care and support for them. So we've got to get both things right. And we know that we need to make sure that the staff providing the day-to-day care who the child interacts with first thing in the morning or before bed or whenever it might be important to get it right. And we're really committed to supporting them. So we've been rolling out within our children's home estate some practice models and some practice approaches which are about understanding children's behaviour, which are about helping adults know what that's about, how to respond, how to care. And that's shown some real signs of effectiveness. I think we've part of how we've managed the broader demand, and so we get into numbers, not people, but part of how the outcomes for children have been better and therefore the demand's been managed is that our homes have shown more skill and have got more have developed their ability to look after young people whose behaviour might be more challenging and might in the past have resulted in an end of a care setting. So that's happening with the people who look after the young people directly. Working with our partners, particularly in the ICB and within LCH and LYPFT, we've been fortunate in attracting investment and support into the staff who work around the staff who work with the children. And so we've got a new team starting, just coming fully on stream in the next week or two. That will complement work that we've developed and invested in from council in terms of placement support and also our therapeutic social work teams. And both of those services are working with young people in care to support their journey. And just finally, we have a programme of work with our transformation team looking at what a child looked after hub will look like. So we've talked about family hubs. We have a care leavers hub at Archway. I want to develop a hub of professionals to support children in care now. So that will include our colleagues in the virtual school. That will include our health colleagues, our nursing colleagues. But I'm ambitious that it also doesn't just stop at those sort of formal things, that we start to think about children having fun, that we start to think about children's engagement in sport and leisure and positive activities. And so that hub will start to come online, I hope, in the next 12 to 18 months, and that will again add support into our homes and to our children in care. And just touching on your point about recruitment and recruiting the right people, we've opened a significant number of homes and we've managed to continue to recruit. And we've recruited some really amazing people looking after our young people at the moment. So I think we're going to be able to continue to do that. It's something we have to work really hard at. And we have to put a lot of effort into making sure we're attracting people, we're getting into the market in the right way, we've got the right sequence of people applying. But at the moment, it's working. We're continuing to recruit. And I don't see any reason why it would stop, but it's something that we have to keep a very close eye on.
If I can just add, so in the corporate parenting board, every meeting we have one of our homes come and speak to us, and I'm looking at my colleagues there because we've had some amazing presentations by the manager of the homes, and some incredible stories about what life was like for our young people when they were external, and we can't wrap around that care that we can in Leeds when they're not in Leeds, and some of the results of them being back in education, leaving the house when they were, you know, not allowed to, and had two adults like supervising them at all times. And you know, I went to visit one young person, and he took himself to the barbers, especially he didn't need to, especially for my visit, especially if he saw my hair. Like, but you know, it's just the outcomes that we see, and so we have. And it is confidential because these are, you know, these are private individuals. But I just wanted to assure you that as elected members, as, you know, corporate parents, that we have oversight and we are informed about what care is being given. And it's very, very individualised to that young person, that child, and recognising their strengths, their needs, their challenges, but also, you know, what they enjoy and have fun, and you know, and you know, setting them up for. And we have had, you know, go from our homes back to family, as well, which is incredible and exactly what we want when it is safe to do so, and the best outcome for those young people. So yeah, we get that reassurance at every corporate parenting.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Kate, happy with that?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's really, really reassuring and really encouraging. And I think you've made a really good point there as well, that actually, you know, bring these children back to Leeds, you know, their families and their corporate parent are far more likely to be able to ensure that they get what they need than an external placement. So not only is there obviously a budgetary motivation to reduce the number of external placements, but quite clearly there were those also really important reasons why that's in their best interest. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thanks, Kate. Just reinforcing the point, really. We're still at fairly early days in terms of bringing, you know, external children cared for externally back into the city. But it's a matter that we talk about. Doesn't matter whether we're on the opposition side, the administration side, or whatever. We talk on a fairly regular basis with senior officers in children and families. And you're quite right to sort of emphasise it, because we are talking about money now. It happens to be that item, but it's simple, easy to forget that the whole point of this is to give, you know, proper care to these children. So it's an item that we will be coming back. Well, if I'm chair next year, that is. An item we will be coming back to next year, because Ben mentioned a significant reduction by the end of next year. We're looking at a reduction from about 151 to 130 in the current year, and down to 97, was it, Ben, I think, in the following year. What we need to know is whether the standard of care, when they've been brought back into Leeds, well, not whether it is, that it is better than what they were receiving sort of externally, and that will be an issue that we'll come back in the scrutiny board. Okay, all right. Councillor Edwards, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wilson asked the question that I was originally going to ask, so so I've changed it a little bit about in-house fostering numbers. So we can see that numbers have gone down. What work is being done to understand some of the reasons for existing foster carers not continuing, or people who have initially expressed interest deciding not to progress that? So that would be the question, and just an observation as well about some of the information sessions. So Councillor Hayden, I think members across this committee and across the council would be very happy to support that. My own experience, however, when I asked about information sessions within my area, so both in Guiseley and also in Yeadon at the nearest community hub, was that there are information sessions, but as an individual member, I haven't been contacted about this. I would like to be contacted about this, as I'm sure many of us would, not least because we could also point officers in the direction of community organisations, locally, events, where it might be useful to have a presence, where there would be a lot of footfall. And also the other observation I would make is that in terms of the timing, I do appreciate officer working hours, and I appreciate the limits on working hours, but when I checked before, it may have changed since then, but when I checked before, the information sessions were on weekdays and during times when a lot of people of working age would not be available, and they were in libraries or community hubs where people of working age would not likely be. So again, I think it would be quite helpful to have some of those conversations with individual board members as well, where information sessions are planned, because we could then support that, and we could do our bit to make sure that those sessions are a success.
Thank you. So several things there. I'll try and take them in order. So in terms of reasons why people leave fostering and move on to do other things, there's a range of reasons for that. And we'll be bringing the annual fostering report into the executive group fairly soon, and that gives a more detailed breakdown. But people change for a range of reasons. So sometimes it's that they reached a point in their lives where they've decided they've done enough fostering and they want to end. And we have a number of foster carers who decide to resign from fostering in their 60s, 70s, and even in their 80s. And we kind of feel that's fair enough, really, to be honest. So there's a number of people who resign, and that's probably the largest cohort of people who leave for those sorts of reasons. We inevitably have a small number who leave because we feel that we've reached the end of the road with them, and that needs to conclude. We have foster carers who stop being foster carers because they take special guardianship orders out for their children, so then look after the children and so provide children with some permanence. And then very occasionally we have foster carers who move out of the area significantly and feel that's a point to end. So there's a range of reasons. We do seek to understand the individual experiences of people who are leaving when we would rather they hadn't, or we don't quite see it. I should also say we have people who leave fostering because they or their partner are poorly or very ill, and they want to spend more time with them or care for them. So there's probably a broader category of kind of life reasons which are not problematic from our point of view, in the sense of that says something about people's confidence in being a foster carer, that they're actually to do with their individual lives and their personal circumstances, and we kind of see that. There are, as far as I can recall, there are very, very few people who leave because they don't agree with us. So if any at all. So I don't think that the reasons for people exiting fostering are particularly problematic, although obviously regrettable in some circumstances because we're keen to have them. A second point of information sessions, thank you. So I do agree. I think we in lots of different areas of what we do, Monday to Friday 9 to 5 is probably our preferred place to be, and that doesn't work. So part of what's happened over the last 3 or 4 months is we've changed some of the job profiles and some of the working arrangements for the team who do that work, so that we've got a profile of worker that fits better. I should say that they are nonetheless working at weekends and working evenings at different events. So it's not a case that we only do Monday to Friday 9 to 4 and libraries and community centres. They are other events. They do attend other things. So we sponsored the family section for at Leeds Pride this year. We are going to be at a number of different festivals and events across the city. And we're keen to be at all of them, to be honest. If we're the landlord, we'd like to be there as part of the package that comes with it. So we're looking at how we make that happen. Apologise if we've not spoken to you directly about that. We should have done that, and I will take that back and do that. I think we are asking about the value of some of those community sessions, partly for the reasons you say, in the sense of is that a really open place to recruit, or should that be part of a recruitment package that's actually quite broad, because we need to be at the White Rose Shopping Centre as much as we need to be in a local library. We need to be places where people go from different backgrounds. So it may be that what we're going to start to do is to look at where those are effective and where we've historically had some impact from them, perhaps focus on those, which might mean that our overall footfall into community centres and libraries reduces. But I do think what you're saying about your understanding of the local networks is really attractive and something that we need to do better with. I think what we are focused on is trying to get the recruitment process working better and get better ask out of it. And as Councillor Hayden said, part of that is going to be engaging with you as local members. But I apologise if we've not been in touch and we've not spoken to you. We will pick that up.
Thank you very much, Ben. Maria.
Yeah, I just want to quickly go back to external placements. We've heard that there's lots of good ones, but we need to be aware that there are some not so good ones and certainly not delivering value for money. And I think on them we need to listen to families and we need to listen to the professionals working with the children on the external placements, because if we are spending a lot of money weekly on these placements that aren't the best for the child, we really need to be taking that on board as well.
I completely agree. I think we need to make sure that we're listening and hearing a range of different people's perspectives on how a particular child is being looked after. And where we have a parent who's committed to that child and continues to take an interest in that child, we absolutely have to be engaged with them, and I expect our staff to do that. And if that's not happening, we will pick that up and address it. But I think you're right. We do need to be very clear about where children are making exceptional progress. They've started to go to school. They're engaged in activities. We're seeing really positive things, and those are the sorts of placements we want to see. And if we're not seeing the progress we want, we need to go in and have conversations about how do we get to that position. So we do have quite a robust posture with providers. We are quite assertive with them where we can be, but we also fundamentally want to have children living in our care in Leeds, or living ideally with family or with family-based care in Leeds. So I think you're right. Where there are concerns about quality or outcomes for children, we need to be really on the front foot about challenging that, and we absolutely need to listen to all the people who would understand that child's world and experience, and make sure that we're taking advantage of that very rich position and hearing voices in there, particularly from parents and carers who know the child really, really well.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, Maria? Maria, happy? Yeah, okay. Shinaz.
Thank you, Chair. So when financial mitigation measures are applied, how do we assess which families and children are most affected by the reduced capacity or the service pressures? And then also, are there any patterns emerging in the use of high cost or area placements, and how do these vary in different wards? Do we have any information around that? And, the length of time in care or family circumstances, is that anything emerging from that? And then we did speak a little bit about impact, but beyond the financial considerations, how are placement decisions evaluated based on stability, continuity, and children's connection in their communities? And I think what you're describing is contextualised safeguarding, which I think is really, really important that we do follow in that manner and really think about, like you're saying, you have been doing, which I think is amazing, considering what's happening with the child, the young person, in where they are and how they're progressing as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think when we're thinking about children in external placements, although it's a lot of young people, it's quite a small number. So starting to think about trends and patterns within that can be quite difficult, because very quickly you get to a very small number of people you're thinking about, and the sort of decisions are being made are very individualised about them. When I think we're thinking more broadly about financial pressures and challenges we're handling, part of what we do is think about the impact on different parts of our community, and that includes young people, but it also includes their families, and it also includes children, young people and families from different backgrounds and with different experiences. So that's absolutely part of what we do in terms of trying to understand where we are. We've deliberately tried to make sure that when we open provision, we're opening it in different parts of the city. So we've tried not to be just in one place. There's a challenge in that, partly to do with sort of cost of houses and stuff, but we have been largely, I think, successful in making sure we've got a footprint of homes across the city, so hopefully children can live close to where they come from or close to their communities. In terms of thinking about when a placement might need to conclude and when we might want to make a conversation with a child about moving to a different placement, there's sort of a couple of things in there. One is very much how they're doing. So clearly, if it's not working as well as we want, there's a basic reason to say, could we do more and do differently with it? I think the other part, and it's really important, is to retain our ambition for children. So sometimes a child who's doing okay, we let them do okay, but we need to be saying, okay, is that good enough? And what's the right thing for them? And I think the challenge for us is holding that ambition conversation to say, I know things are okay, but you're coming to the end of school, actually you're really, you could do, what could we do for you? What do you want? How can we make this happen for you? So that we hold ambition for children right at the centre of what we're doing, and for all children, because I think sometimes ambition can be attenuated or contextualised, but actually all children can achieve, all children have potential, and we need to make sure we get them to that. Does that help answer your question?
Thanks very much indeed, Ben. We have no more sort of questions or comments at the moment. Officers, happy you've covered all the sort of issues you would like to cover under this particular item? Okay. We'll move on. We move on to the recommendations. Members are asked to note the content of the report and appendices setting out the Council's financial position at month 7, and specifically to note the position of services in the Children and Families Directorate, which is our remit, of course. And we're also asked to highlight any further areas of scrutiny work should any arise during the discussion of this item. Could someone propose that, please? No proposal? Yeah. Seconder? All in favour? Any against? All in favour. Thank you very much indeed. That was Durant. Right, if we could just move on to item number 8. If anybody wants to speak, please do indicate that you want to speak to me and come through the chair. Don't try not to jump in. It doesn't matter who you are. You will get your opportunity. It doesn't matter what you want to talk about. I'll give you opportunity. We'll stay till midnight if necessary. But please do come through the chair. It helps me sort of control things a little bit better. All right. A lot of the discussion during the last item, I think, could just as easily fit under the next item, basically, which is the scrutiny of the budget, the initial budget proposals for next year, and the provisional budgets for 27-28 and 28-29. I did mention that I wanted to talk about demand. Victoria, the finance officer, came on Monday to sort of talk us through this, and she was very clear about how complex and difficult it is to actually forecast demand over a few months, never mind 12 months, and never mind 3 years, as is the case on this particular sort of budget item. But the reason I wanted to mention it is that the demands for the coming year, as you will know, the heaviest demands are on adults and health. But there's a considerable demand on this directorate here. And if I just refer back to the last year's budget, the budget that was for the 26-27 year, or the forecast for it, in February it was shown as an overspend of, anticipated overspend of £38 million for the 26-27 year. By the time we'd reached May, it had gone over £100 million. Which gives you an idea of how things can change from sort of month to month. It seemed a quite incredible increase to me, and I never really got a satisfactory explanation for it, other than it was demand. So when you do talk about it, I'd like you to cover demand in terms of how difficult it is to actually cover that aspect, but in as briefly as you can, please. Okay, I have sort of Lucy again, Ben and Pete if he wishes to speak on this item, so lead on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So we've just got some slides to go through with your self-presentation in terms of the proposed budget for 26-27 and beyond. So just, yeah, thank you. So in terms of what this presentation is going to cover, we're going to look at the overview of the proposed budget for 26-27 that went to December's exec board. This was prior to the provisional settlement which we received in December, so it also summarises the changes within that settlement, the latest positioning and closing the future year's budget gaps, and then the specific directorate saving proposals in relation to children and families, and then any questions at the end. Going to the next one. So in terms of the overall proposed budget for the authority for 26-27, at the moment we're projecting a budget of £726 million, which is an increase of £70 million since the 25-26 budget, which equates to a 10.81% increase across the authority as a whole. So if you go on to the next slide. So this just demonstrates how that budget is split across the directorates. And as we just mentioned, it's no surprise to see that 64% of the budget is across to social care and reflects those additional demand growth across both adults and children's. Children's and families equates to 28% of the proposed budget for 26-27, and that is 192.3 million, which equates to a growth of just shy of 26 million from 25-26 across children's and families. If you move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide just illustrates the projected gap over the next 3 years and demonstrates that that gap has now been met for but there are further projected budget gaps of 51.9 million in 27-28 and a further 69.7 million in 28-29. So there are further challenges beyond 26-27. So back in December of last year, we received the provisional settlement for the authority as a whole. This time it's actually a 3-year settlement, which will hopefully provide some longer term certainty on the budget position going forward. One key element of that settlement was that 30 grants were consolidated into the provisional settlement, which should make things funding streams a lot simpler and more efficient into 26-27. So in total, the settlement provided an additional funding of 30.88 million for 26-27, above and beyond what was included in the proposed budget that went to December's exec board. On to the next slide, please. So in terms of, since we've received that settlement, there has been some further work done to identify additional pressures within the initial proposed budget. So pressures have been reassessed and additional pressures highlighted, which have effectively utilised that full additional funding of £31 million. And this just demonstrates where those split. As you can see in there, £11 million of that is in relation to adult social care demand pressures. So just on to the next one. So in terms of the key assumptions for 26-27, in summary, the updated proposed budget includes additional income of 101 million, additional pressures of 101 million, and includes savings to be delivered across the authority of 57.9 million in 26-27. This slide just illustrates the pay and demand pressures by each directorate. I think the key point to note on here is in relation to children's and families. So the budget now includes additional budget pressures of £26 million for children's and families, of which 17.99 million is in relation to the demand pressures, mainly within CLA budgets and transport budgets. I think this slide just notes that obviously, as with any budget, it's set at a point in time, and there are some key costs and incomes elements that will be unknown. So as we've discussed previously, demand in demography, cost of living, inflation, and then there's also pressures within the dedicated schools grant and the housing revenue account. So whilst the budget is set on trends and analysis and best information at the time, there are some unknowns that may impact on the budget during the year. So just on to the next slide. So this slide just illustrates sort of the approach to identifying the savings that have been done in this year in terms of aligning these savings towards the change programme and the new council plan. Just go on. So just in terms of ring-fence budget, within children's and families sits the dedicated schools grant, the DSG grant. So it's just worth noting here, in terms of indicative funding allocations for 26-27, this demonstrates how that funding is across the various blocks. But in totality, we're looking at £1.1 million for 26-27. The majority of that, 793 million, sits within the schools block, and that is generally all passported out to schools. In terms of the medium-term financial strategy for the dedicated schools grant, you will be aware there are significant pressures and challenges within the, particularly within the high needs budget. So in terms of 26-27, overall, we are projecting an in-year projected deficit of 45.8 million, which would deliver a carry-forward deficit of 84.7 million against a DSG grant at the end of 26-27. And just in terms of the director's savings, I think it's just worth noting before I hand over to Ben that children's and families within this budget have proposed 2.4 million of savings against the 26-27 budget. I think Ben's going to go through those in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Lucy. So there's a number of lines there from children and families. There's a particular piece of work that we're going to do around the transition into care provided by adult social care. We think there's some opportunities there in terms of the point of transition and the use of provision that can care for people as they become adults, rather than waiting until somebody's just on the cusp of adulthood to make that change. And we think that will contribute significantly in terms of some of the costs that are associated with that care being provided. It's a relatively small number of young people involved in that, but their packages of care as children are quite substantial, and then as adults are quite significant, but not as substantial. And what we're looking to do is to see if we can improve that transition and make that more effective, and thereby save some of our costs, but also critically improve the experience of stability that young person experiences by not having as many transitions in their mid to late teenage years. You'll note there's some lines about additional partner contributions. There's conversations going on with partners about their contributions for next financial year, and we anticipate that those will go positively for us. And we are continuing to work with colleagues in housing, particularly around how we assess homelessness among 16, 17-year-olds and how we respond to that. And that then plays into how we procure housing. So colleagues will be aware that we have a number of families that we're supporting with housing, and what we're looking to do is develop a protocol with our colleagues in housing where they act as our experts in the sector in sourcing accommodation, which we then will support and resource. So we see some efficiencies there. And then we have at the bottom the substantial line, which is about the reduction in overall CLA demand, which we're working through and we've talked about at some stage. There are probably some other proposals that are being developed that will contribute and support that package, but they're not included in this presentation because they're not quite ready yet to go with. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ben. Does anybody else like to comment? Okay. Just give us a little bit. I think there's an £18 million figure quoted for demands for next year. Given how complex and difficult it is to do this, how confident are you that figure does? It seems rather low to me, I have to say. How accurate do you think it actually is?
I think you're right to emphasise that that's made up of a lot of moving parts, a lot of different components of demand, and that what we've had to do with each one is try to make a projection about what's going to happen in each area, and it's a number of different types of issue and area. I think at the moment our best assessment is that figure. I think we are subject to events outside of our control, although I think we are taking steps to bring those into our control. And we do have a number of positive sort of initiatives that are really important in terms of the overall demand in the system. So Councillor Hayden referenced some of the work that's happening around Family First and Family Help, and that's going to be really significant in terms of providing more support to families at an earlier stage in their journey with us, potentially, hopefully, helping them at the right away and our support, but meaning if that they do continue to need our support, they've had support and intervention earlier. And I think that's really important in terms of setting the climate and setting the environment in terms of how a family experiences services from us. So there are some tailwinds that are supporting us, I think, and give us grounds for confidence with it. But I think there is a challenge in terms of the individual lines, each one of which is subject to its own variabilities. So there is challenge within it. What we have done though throughout is very much work on the basis of understanding very clearly where we are today and where we will be, understanding very clearly what the journey to that point has been, so we know what our annual demand has been over the last couple of years in a particular area. And have worked hard to start those figures on where we expect to be in March and a really clear stepping off point so that we have more confidence. Obviously, the further away we get from that point, the harder it is to project with confidence. But we have been very clear that we need to avoid any surprises at all coming up. We want to be very clear about what we see as our best assessment of the figure and be conservative within some of those numbers as well.
Thanks very much, Ben. Pete, would you like to speak?
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to say within all of that, I think it's exactly the right challenge that we, when there's 16.9 million to come out over the 3 years and 10.4 is attached to children looked after, we have to make sure that we haven't put a heroic figure in which isn't realistic. And I think Ben's articulation there, it's important to remember that safeguarding thresholds are non-negotiable, and I would hope that we'd have the support of this board that where there is a need, we have to meet that need. I'm not overly keen on the use of the word demand. We've talked about demand this morning a lot. If we strip it back, what we've got is we have the population of children in Leeds, and we have within those children we have unmet needs. And I think what Ben is describing in the national reforms is a recognition that nationally the system has to change. And that's the system for education, health and care plan, and the system for children looked after. We've talked a lot about the money because the money is locked to the end where we haven't met children's needs, families' needs earlier. And that will be the key to unlocking the finances. So possibly the question that Scrutiny may wish to consider over the medium term is, are we far enough on top of the reforms, and are we confident that the whole system for prevention is gathering pace so that schools are doing their part, health are doing their part, right through to health visiting and everything that you'd have there. A whole council endeavour around meeting the needs of children and families early so that you're heading off the costs which are locked to the consequence of not meeting that need. And it's a different way of looking at it to saying we've got demand, because when you say demand, it's almost like you're not in control of anything with it. And there are points along that way which we can look at differently. I'll just make this point, as if I may, to be provocative. When the question was asked earlier, what does success look like? It will be beyond this medium-term financial plan. Success is when this board is having the conversation around how do we safely decommission children's homes, because we have really got ahead of that population of need.
Thanks very much, Pete. You mentioned prevention in the course of that. I've been asking, I think now for 3 months, to see a copy of the council plan, which is the magic bullet that's going to produce all the savings over the next sort of 2 or 3 years, and we still haven't seen it. I'm told it will go to the executive board next month. It'll be interesting to see it in its totality, because I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a bit sick of seeing all the various sort of promises and plans and all this kind of stuff, but nothing actually behind it. So we'll know a little bit more next month, hopefully, on that one. So thanks very much indeed. Councillor Hayden, would you like to finish off this item?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say a huge thank you to, this is a really complex area of work. When we're dealing with the needs of children and their families, we can't say, oh, we'll wait next month and, I'll give it a few weeks, or, but that point that was made by Pete there about getting it right for children and families earlier on will mean that hopefully we won't be having these conversations as much in the future. And yes, I agree, that's what success looks like. We were at a point a good few years ago where we were decommissioning our large children's homes, but the world changed and we've responded again with it, and hopefully, yes, we will have more and more children with their families where they belong and supporting their families to live happy, fulfilled, thriving lives, because that's what we want for our children. We don't want them just to survive, we want them to thrive. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. Just going back to the point that Pete made about demand, unfortunately, I think it's one of these finance words which always seems to come up when we have finance sort of discussions. So, but it's a point well made, and we'll be looking at it in sort of due course. And of course, well, at least 2 of you will be here on a fairly regular basis next year. So we'll see how the budget actually goes. Right, on to comments and questions. Okay, thank you. If you could just let me know if you want to speak wherever. First one is Councillor Goodall.
Thanks, Chair. So we've been talking about prevention there, and it's mentioned as part of the change programme. As everyone knows, we're losing some of the children's centres, and I speak to teachers, parents and carers and others who work with children who are concerned that that was one of the very things that was providing the prevention, and they're asking for reassurance for how what they were providing is now going to be provided. I know we have talked about this before, but do we have a really clear idea of the excellent kind of work that those children's centres were doing? How are we going to cover that prevention work?
We are, thank you, and absolutely recognise the value of the work that our colleagues in the children's centres and family hubs do. We are very clear of the need to make sure that we get the right support for families at the right time, and to make sure that families can access that support in a way that works for them. And not just families, but also the people who work with families at a universal level, so colleagues like teachers and play workers, youth workers. And it's really important that we make sure that those services are available, that they're accessible, that people can use them where they see them and where they need them. And just picking up on the point Councillor Edward made before about timeliness, that they are available at a time that is convenient and right for them. So our design of our services is of our services through Family Help, so our Best Start and Beyond programme, through the Youth Alliance work that we're doing, has that very much in mind, that services need to be available, they need to be locality based, they need to draw in the skills and expertise of other colleagues as well. You'll be aware that we've been doing some development work in part of the city, looking at what our proposals under Family Help need to look like and how we're going to deliver those. I'm pleased to be able to say that we've got the first findings back from that in terms of recommendations about next steps. Very much a locality offer, it's very much about proximity, it's also very much about intensity and support for people there. So I absolutely understand what you're saying and have and think that's something that we want to get to. Those ideas are very much part of our proposals and part of what we're thinking about as we refine those to a point where we've got a clear project that we're going to then start to implement. By way of sort of reassurance on that, those project management processes are in place. They're starting to be busy and used. So we are on track to deliver some of those programmes that we need to deliver to develop our prevention programme and prevention offer.
Councillor Goodall. Yeah.
Thank you. That's reassuring. What I'm hearing from families, for example, it obviously there's still a good service in areas where there is a lot of deprivation. However, we have pockets of deprivation in higher income areas. Those families are the ones who can least afford to travel. So has that been factored into account for those areas of providing some kind of local service in terms of prevention with parents with young children, parents and carers with young children?
I absolutely recognise that wherever you live, if you need support from us, you need support from us, and we're committed to making that happen. I think what we will work through is what we understand in terms of the levels of need and demand that we have in places, but we've got to avoid the idea that we've got to avoid as much as we can people having to make long and difficult journeys to get to provision and get to support. I want the support that we offer to children and families to be as close as possible, and I want that support to be available through the services that they already use if we can. So if they have good relationships with schools or nurseries, if they have good relationships with third sector groups, how do we leverage and support those groups to provide more of that support? So I think thinking about how services are provided and where they're provided are really critical parts of what we need to do. And we absolutely want services to be available to people where they need them and where it's convenient for them to use. Our intention, our hope is to provide support early and quickly so that people don't then need to use our support later on in their lives. So it's absolutely in our interest to get it in a way that's attractive and easy for people to use, and we're committed as much as we can to doing that.
Okay. Councillor Hayden, sorry, I did ask before if put your hands up and I missed you when you put it up before. I do apologise. I was looking left and right instead of straight on.
At least I was doing, following the right protocol. Just to build on that, we still will have 31 children's centres, and they are right across the city. They're from Wetherby Ward to Guiseley and Rawdon to the south, and right across the city. Yes, they are more concentrated in areas of deprivation, and that is absolutely right. But there is a universal offer right across the city. We have more children's centres than any other core city, in fact, than any other local authority area in the country, significantly more. We held on to our children's centres, and we have modernised, and the service is being modernised as well. You don't have to have a building to deliver the services. and we will be a part of that modernisation is using community buildings and buildings, as Ben said, where people are already, where they go locally. But a lot of the children's centre work to families in need happens in the family's own home, and that's what we don't see. And that's really, really important work. And actually, it's not just families who are struggling financially who need our support. I know as a mother of 2 children, I needed that support when they were little. I need that support now when they're teenagers. And we will be developing that offer with our colleagues in public health who are recommissioning the 0 to 19 service, who work really well and as part of one big team with our children's centre staff, so that we actually now school nurses who are part of that team, and a really important part of that team, will be contacting family when their child turns 13, because going forward. So we're modernising the whole offer and recognising that families don't need support just when their children are little. Actually, they need ongoing support, and it shouldn't just be schools who are offering that support. It should be the whole system, and us as a whole community, and as a whole city offering that support, because I know that I would have very much valued a telephone call. And my children are wonderful, don't get me wrong, love them and all that. But it is challenging bringing up children, whoever you are. I will, it would be very difficult to find somebody who doesn't have challenges when bringing up a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Perhaps a two-handed wave, and I might pick you up next time. Thanks very much indeed. Maria.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One with the schools, the SG money. There's a lot of schools at the moment putting children on reduced timetables, forced reduced timetables. Is there any penalties for them for doing that? Because obviously they're getting paid the full amount and the children aren't at school. And another one, just the prevention work. So we're talking about children, maybe they're looked after children more than anything. Is there anything preventative? Because I know the Youth Justice Service don't do a preventative service for children that are on the cusp of criminality. There doesn't seem to be anything there for them. That's it.
Perhaps if I come in on the prevention point, and then perhaps Rebecca, would you pick up about the issue with schools, if that's okay? Just in terms of prevention, taking the specific point about youth justice, I think you're right to identify that challenge about young people who are at risk of getting involved in crime but aren't there yet, and how do we work with them. I'm really pleased to be able to say in the last sort of 12 months or so the Youth Justice Service has been able to develop its offer in that regard, and through receipt of some funding from the Ministry of Justice has been able to start to develop a preventative programme which is starting to show some positivity. It's certainly the case that there was a period of time where that wasn't available, but I'm pleased to say that that's become available in the last period. A programme called Turnaround. So there's the turnaround programme, and then there's also the Securing Young Futures panels as well, both of which are trying to get ahead of young people who might be coming into the system or might have just entered the criminal justice system, and providing a more focused response there. The broader prevention work that we are talking about isn't only for children looked after, it's absolutely for families and carers. So very much through the Family First programme and family help programmes, that will see us changing how we offer support to families who are seeking support from us. We're looking to increase the number of people available to support those families, and we're looking at people with different backgrounds and different skills coming into that space to do that. And that will help us provide a more intense service earlier on, and provide more support to families before we get into statutory social work processes. We also have we also have the Best Start and Beyond work, which is particularly focused on young children's outcomes and supporting their development up to their sort of start at school. And we have a range of work going on that's going to develop our youth work offer for teenagers. We've been successful in bidding in and receiving funding for be one of 8 pilot programmes nationally looking at developing developing a youth hub and looking at developing our universal youth services. So those programmes are coming online. There's quite a bit in that of stuff that's coming and not here yet, and I appreciate the need for it. I'm really excited that we've got the opportunity to do that, and colleagues have been effective at bidding in for resources from central government to deliver different innovation programmes, and on picking them up and making them work, all of which I think will contribute to a broader ecology of provision which contains much more in the way of preventative work, because that's where we need to be. It doesn't work doing it anywhere else, and we really recognise that. I think prevention is absolutely where our practice focus has to be in terms of supporting families to look after their children, or carers to look after their children, because they do it better than we do, and we want to be in that space as much as possible. So there are a number of things coming, and we could perhaps, if it would be helpful, I could talk to you in more detail about some of those, if that would be welcome. Rebecca, are you able just to talk a bit about education element?
Thank you. In terms of the ability to do a financial readjustment to a school who offers a part-time timetable, there isn't one within the regulations, so we're not able to do that. But the thing that we rely on is that kind of the moral imperative and the conversation that we can have with schools around what's right and what's in the best interests of a child or a young person. We have been working with schools around the need for part-time timetables to only be on a time-limited basis, that they have to be planned, they should be always done with parental agreement. You know, what you're sharing there, Maria, is the idea that some parents have been forced to accept that part-time timetable, and I recognise that. So we have got some work to do with our schools across the city around the use of part-time timetables, and making sure that they're only used in the right way for a very short period of time, as a means to re-engaging that young person rather than just reducing their time. But in a simple answer, we're not able to take the money back.
And just to come in, certainly when we're the corporate parent for a child, we're very keen that that child accesses full-time education, that they're supported to engage in the right education for them. And we have an ongoing dialogue with our colleagues in the learning in schools about how we do that and how we support it, and also thinking about how we as a good parent are supporting and preparing our child to go to school and to get the most from school. So it's something that we see as absolutely central to a child's journey, and it's some of the most important prevention work we do is the positive experiences children can have at school, which are self-efficacious, which help them develop, which help them grow and open up new opportunities for them to be them. So it's absolutely something that's central to what we want to see.
Just one thing, the preventative work, the youth justice, and one of our members come back to us, they're actually not offering any preventative work at the moment, but as and when they are, will that be offered to the children outside of the area as well?
I will come back to you on that, because my understanding, the meeting I was in earlier this week, was that there was a degree there was prevention work going on. It might be that we're not quite meaning the same thing by what we're saying. So what we need, so perhaps if we can have a conversation outside of here, we can talk a bit more about the individual circumstance. Youth justice services tend to be delivered on a locality basis, i.e. Leeds Youth Justice Service delivers services to children living in Leeds. I think where that's slightly different is when a child is looked after, where they hold have a case holding responsibility to make sure that the service is offered to that child. But if a child's not living in Leeds and is not looked after, then the responsibility for that child's support would sit with the Youth Justice Service that covers that area. Normally, obviously, we don't want to be dogmatic about that. So if a child moves for a period and is coming back, then I wouldn't want to see that change. I would want us to hold responsibility there. But generally speaking, the rule is that Youth Justice Services deliver services for the geographical area that they're responsible for.
Okay, Maria. Okay, Councillor Hayden.
Yeah, it's just in the same way with the Youth Justice. So when children from other authorities come into Leeds, then they are the responsibility of our Youth Justice Service. So we take on responsibility for their work and prevent, hopefully to turn them around and ensure their safeguarding, and that they are prepared for when they, if they are in custody, for that when they return in a a good way to back to life and back to normal life. So yes, so we have Wetherby Young Offenders. We have Adelbeck, which is our Leeds City Council facility, which takes children from all over the country. In fact, we have very few of our own in Adelbeck. So. And then Wetherby also comes under our safeguarding remit as a Youth Justice Authority. And then, so in the same way, children who are out of area would come under the same, whether they're in custody or on the edge or anything out of the local youth justice.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Malacca.
Thank you, Chair. Just touching upon what you've just asked regarding to the part-time timetable. I've had a case, but I'm not going to go into detail with that. I just want to ask quickly, when a child is given a provision, and perhaps if, as an example, it's given as a full week, and that then reduces to being a part-time, does that mean then do we look for somewhere else for the child to go? Do we continue to give that school the money, and how do they then kind of like bring back the funding? Because that was, I couldn't figure out when I had that case and the parent was trying to explain to me to say she could have tried somewhere else, and it was just, to get that funding to go somewhere else or agree with another school whilst the children were, better means were to be provided for the twin children. And there was just a lot behind that. But I think some of it you did get my email, and thank you for always replying to my emails, because I seem to be getting very, very, very confused. I get confused sometimes with that element of funding and provision of classes and school for the children. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Rebecca?
Thank you. The complexity of pupil funding is that, understandably, schools think about funding attached to an individual child, but in reality, schools are funded based on a lagged funding model that's based on school census. So the number of children who are on roll at a point in time generates the funding for the school for the following year. There are then some elements of individual pupil funding that are allocated based on individual pupil needs, but that fluctuates, and so when there are children moving between different schools or there are children on part-time timetables, there are only very limited circumstances in the funding regs where we can adjust a school's funding allocation based on an individual pupil's movement or changes. And I think some of our work is about getting the schools to understand that in the same way that we do, that actually it's not a case of each individual child, because we'd never want a child to be seen as being coming with an envelope of money that's about their needs. It's about how we plan provision that meets all the children's needs. So we're constantly having those conversations with schools. Each of the schools are also funded in a different way. So our maintained schools are funded on a financial year on the previous census. Academies are funded on an academic year based on the previous October census. So there's lots of lagged changes when a pupil moves between different schools. Lucy, I don't know whether there's anything you want to add on that.
No, I think you've covered it all, Rebecca. Thank you.
Just to come in, I think where we have children who are looked after, there's a slightly different sort of process around it. We have a process of children's personal education plans being formulated each term and understanding the need in there, and then starting to think about what the offer of care is for those children and what the offer of education support is for those children. I think part of what we do really well is when we have young people's education offer change. We have the virtual school supporting both the school in terms of how to provide an education for that child and how to meet that need, but also supporting us in terms of being the corporate parent in terms of advocating for that child. And we've worked quite hard with our social work colleagues to give them advice in terms of what to do if a child gets a part-time timetable or is asked to leave school for a period of time, and how to come back. So it's something that we're trying to work on an individual level for people, and to make sure that we're providing the right advocacy and the right support, but also providing the right support to teachers, working with a child and supporting them.
All right, thank you very much indeed. That's the last of the questions and comments. Be glad to know. Really, just to sort of compliment you on the presentation you've made today. There's a huge amount of financial sort of detail in there over the next sort of 2 or 3 years. But although we slipped into policy work rather more than we should have done, I think it was very valuable, because I think members have now got an idea of what you're actually doing, what the plan is, you know, where we're going next, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much indeed for that. We'll move on to the recommendations. To consider the relevant information provided within the report on the proposed budget for next year and the provisional budget for the following 2 years, and identify any specific comments or recommendations for consideration by the Executive Board as it prepares its final proposal for consideration by full Council on the 25th of February next month. To note that a summary of the deliberations of all 5 scrutiny boards during the period of consultation on the initial budget proposals will be submitted for consideration by the Executive Board on the 11th of February. That's the paper that Rob sent out last night. I don't expect anyone to comment on it today unless you're desperate to. By all means, come back to Rob or I if you feel there's anything you'd like to add, take away, or whatever. More than happy to accept any suggestions at any time. Would someone like to propose those 2 recommendations? No? Councillor Wilson. Second, Councillor Edwards. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Carried unanimously. All right, thanks very much indeed. If we could just leave the next item, number 9, and go to number 10. The Chief Executive's here with our legal colleagues, and if we could just move straight on to that one, I'd be very grateful. Lucy, are you staying for this item, or are you moving on? Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, everybody. Fully mic'd up now. Okay. Welcome, Ed and colleagues. Helen, Councillor Hayden, would you like to just kick this one off before we move on? Thank you.
Thank you. So this is, I'm really pleased to present this performance report, which provides an update on our progress in delivering the Children and Young People's Plan and our wider ambitions for children and families across Leeds. Oh, sorry. Are we going the wrong? I thought I was so organised. Sorry. And apologies for not listening properly.
Take your time. Don't worry. Just settle yourself down.
It's been a bit of a week. Right. Okay. So this report is a response to the white paper agreed at full council on the 19th of December. It provides assurance that the council continues to meet its statutory duties under Section 18 of the Children Act and sets out the actions taken following the exceptional circumstances that arose at the end of November, when the Director of Children's Services and both designated deputy directors were absent from work. The safeguarding and care of children is one of the Council's highest priorities, it's my highest priority, and that commitment has been recognised through Ofsted's outstanding judgment for the third consecutive time. The White Paper reaffirmed the Council's confidence in the leadership of children and families, and this report demonstrates that the statutory framework remained robust throughout this period of senior absences. Legal Services and Internal Audit have reviewed all key decisions taken during that time. Their conclusion is clear. Decisions were made lawfully, appropriately and in full accordance with the Council's constitution by authorised officers. The independent external expert view included in this report also confirms that the Council's approach was sound, that safeguarding processes remain strong. The report outlines a set of proposed actions to strengthen resilience further. These include increasing the number of posts formally designated as deputies so that statutory responsibilities can always be met, even during periods of staff absence. The Chief Executive or Deputy Chief Executive to act as a designated officer should a situation arise where a statutory officer and all deputies are unavailable until an interim appointment is approved. New processes are also proposed to quickly identify any gaps in key officer roles, supported by a review of the statutory and regulatory duties attached to each post. In addition, it is proposed to add the absence of officers to the corporate risk register to ensure oversight and that all systems remain up to date. Taken together, these steps provide assurance that the Council continues to meet its statutory duties and is taking proactive action to reinforce the stability and resilience of the Children and Families Directorate. It also fully explains why these people are sitting beside me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. I have 7 names down on the order paper here, as it were. But Ed, I assume you will be starting this one off, will you? Thank you.
If that's right, Chair. Just not too much to add to what Councillor Hayden has said, but just to say we welcome this conversation ahead of Exec Board later in February. This is part of my goal for us to be a transparent and learning organisation, so we're here to listen and to improve the paper based on your suggestions. I'd like to also just take a moment to thank the continuing Children and Family Senior Leadership Team for their excellent work through this period that the independent DCS Colin Pettigrew sort of looked at and said, you know, he was impressed with the way people have stepped up, as am I, and we should be proud of that work. We've got a range of proposals that Councillor Hayden has talked through in the paper. To be clear on the deputies, we're proposing in the paper that goes to the General Purposes Committee, the Director of Adults and Health to be added to that list, because normally, as is in the case in this authority, the DAS often has experience of children's services directly themselves and certainly of social work, so they are skilled in a lot of the similar areas, so it makes sense a deputy. We're also adding the substantive role that currently the Deputy Director for Resources and Strategy to make sure that we have the full Children and Families Senior Leadership Team covered. A couple of changes to the what's in the paper as we've continued to have discussions with elected members and others, not massive, but just want to make sure the committee is aware. We talk about the authority that we're proposing to give to me to make immediate appointments to fill immediate gaps, just so that we're covered through, you know, should these unprecedented circumstances happen again. And we've changed it from 6 months, the period that I could appoint to, my role could appoint to 3 months, recognising that this is a very short-term cover. And so we want to make sure that's appropriately bounded. And then separately, we've talked, and in the Extraordinary Council, we talked about mandatory safeguarding training for all members. We want to do this as soon as possible. There's a question as we're approaching a set of elections soon, do you start it before or after? We're just working that through with both the leader and we'll be working it through with groups as well to make sure we can do that in a sensible way. So we'll be tweaking the wording of that just to say we want to get on with it, and we're just working about how best to do that. But those are the only sort of amendments to the paper that you have before you. Really happy to take questions, thoughts. Just also to introduce Catherine Kev from our legal team, and Catherine fulfills the role of Statutory Monitoring Officer as well as part of her job.
Indeed, Ed. Does anybody on that side want to add to what Ed and Councillor Hayden have said? No? Okay. Over to members. Councillor Goani.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Councillor Hayden. Ed, whilst some people voted against the mandatory training on child protection, child safeguarding, which I find quite bizarre, what would happen to councillors who didn't take up the training?
I'm happy to respond. So we need to work out, we have other areas where I think we do have mandatory requirements for councillors, and what we'll seek to do is to adapt what happens there to here. For me, it's a clear sort of expectation on members, and members will have to sort of take that seriously themselves. But my goal is to make sure that we work this through in a way that's comparable with other mandatory requirements for councillors. That it's similar, like in the timing, we'll just work that through as we go, if that's all right.
Happy with that, Councillor Kabani? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have 4 questions. I'll try and be very brief on them. And I don't think I've ever been on a scrutiny board before where we've had the high echelons of the council with us. So it's welcome. It feels like a star chamber, but it's welcome that you're here. Thank you for coming to scrutiny. Just working through the report in order. There was a comment in the external advice received from Mr. Pettigrew, which mentions the councillor briefing note that was sent on the 10th of December. I mentioned this in the full council debate, but that wasn't sent to all elected members. Indeed, I suspect the majority opposite me would never have actually received that briefing note. There's mention at paragraph 7 in the report where Chief Executive notified Ofsted. So could we have an assurance that in terms of lessons learnt, that should a situation like this arise again, at the moment at which we feel it's necessary to inform people like Ofsted, then elected members of this council should be informed automatically at that stage as well? Could we capture that somewhere is the first question.
Ed, yeah? No?
Yeah, sure. So so the note that we're referring to went to group leaders. I'm happy to consider how we best get word out to members. In this council, as I understand it, we do sort of blend between what goes through group leaders and what goes to all council, all elected members. Very happy to figure out how we best do that. The principle for me is that they were made aware and that we leave some of these things we leave within groups, but very happy to consider how we best do that. And with Ofsted, sort of conversations with Ofsted, of course, it'd be impractical to alert you of every conversation we have with Ofsted. That would be exhausting for everyone. Very happy to make sure that we can find the right balance. We've tried to do that here, but happy to work with you to make sure we have that right balance.
I guess my view would be, as we were informed last week, I think it was, by Councillor Hayden, we're informed whenever an appointment is made. It then follows that we should be informed when there is a vacancy as such or something in. I think that would be the practice. My suggestion would be. On paragraph 8, where it talks about the audit team looking at the decisions made in that period and whether there was any issues. I guess my observation would be how confident can we be that there won't be any legacy issues? And it's difficult to think of hypotheticals and decisions that are made, but we might have made a placement, agreed a placement externally in that time frame, and it might not be 6 months down the line when we realise something has gone wrong and there's a review. And my question would be, at that point, the personal responsibility would rest with the absent director. And so how confident can we be that the nature of the decisions that have been reviewed were ones that that might not create a legacy issue, i.e. were they all just simply contractual, or were some of them around child placements, etc.?
Thank you. And then I'll pass to Catherine as well, I think. So just in terms of what we're trying to do at this stage, Councillor, we've had 2 exercises to look over the gap and look as best we can with the time and resources available on the decisions that were made through that period. You've mentioned the internal audit. We did ask, and I did ask Colin Pettigrew to have a look over, discuss with the teams what work was done in that time, what decisions were made. He's done that too, and he says no evidence or suggestion that decisions that were required to be made during this period were not done so and not done so in a timely way. You're right, that doesn't provide cast iron assurance on absolutely every decision in the same way as on any single day in children's services decisions are being made that intimately affect the lives of residents and vulnerable children and young people in Leeds. Catherine can discuss further the sort of the specifics on the legal work. I'm working with Pete Thorpe, now in post as interim Director of Children's Services. If we do see any sort of, if concerns do arise about the period that was uncovered, we'll make sure that, most importantly, that we have the right decisions being made for children in Leeds, as we try and do every day. I don't want to stand here, though, and say we have cast iron certainty on absolutely everything that was done on any given day, because that's why we have sort of case reviews and all the things that we do in the unit to make sure we're looking over things. So I would say, though, asking Colin to come in and do that work and look carefully and really dig in with the team, we felt was a really important further level of assurance to exactly those concerns that you mentioned. Catherine, do you want to add to that?
Thank you. If I could, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you. If I could just come in, Ed I think has sort of covered the children's services aspect. If I could just cover the sort of potential legal implications, the other side of that, which my team did look at as well. There was, and is potentially a low risk of judicial review with a potential award of damages or a mandatory order. We believe that in those circumstances that those risks are very low, and we believe that actually the most likely damage, if you like, from the legal perspective is in terms of reputation and the potential legal costs for pursuing or defending any judicial review claim. But we don't believe that any such claim would be successful. We're pretty comfortable. Obviously, you can never say with 100% certainty, but we believe that there's a high degree of certainty that we wouldn't be unsuccessful in defending such a claim. Thank you.
And in terms of conscious thinking, and talk about this sort of broadly, so hypothetically as well, but in a scenario where we have a named person who takes personal responsibility, who, so say in future that individual is not capable of being in work, if we had a period of time where we acknowledged we didn't have that person, 2-week period of time where that person wasn't in post, in terms of the legal side of that, obviously we've been making decisions on the basis that person was still the named person, or it's delegated. But if there's no named, that I think I read in the report that although it's delegated down, we acknowledge that actually the named person still carried that responsibility, but they can't if they're not in work. So where does that sit from the employee's point of view? Are we still technically making decisions that they're liable for?
If I could just start to address that, and then I'll hand over to Kev as well, bringing my colleague there. So a statutory officer, in this case the Director of Children's Services, is professionally responsible in a personal capacity for ensuring the discharge, and in the case of the Director of Children's Services, for ensuring the discharge of education and social services functions, so safeguarding functions particularly. They're not required to discharge those duties personally. That delegation of duties is and was lawful in accordance with our scheme of delegation. We did seek a verbal opinion of Council, and that was Council's view that was perfectly lawful, and the fact that we didn't have, or the DCS was absent at that point, didn't affect the lawfulness of that scheme of delegation. I'll hand over to Kev now for a little bit more detail on that score.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that in terms of the named individual, the way that the Constitution is set up and the proposed changes will, to pick up your precise point, it allows us to designate other people that will come in and step into that gap as a named person. So the responsibility will shift through the Constitution to those other named individuals. With the changes that we're introducing, the situation you're suggesting, I don't think it's actually possible that it can arise again in future, because it will always revert to the chief executive if nobody in that list can assume personal responsibility. So any gap that arises will ultimately be covered, and then an interim appointment can be put in place at that stage. So, yeah, I think if the changes go through GPC and full council, I don't think there's any actual possibility of that situation repeating itself.
Thank you. And the final question, it's probably more of a remark, but in terms of safeguarding training, one of the observations that was raised, and why having a blanket yes/no vote is not quite always as simple, is that there are a number of elected members, myself included, who have professional safeguarding training already, and we need a process to recognise within this, because it's not, we can't impose something by statute, so it's going to be presumably something we say through some sort of code of conduct, that we're saying if a member doesn't complete this, presumably we're saying they could technically be referred to standards, because I guess that's the only power we can have. You can't disqualify a member. So because we are in control of that process, I think we need to be able to recognise where members already have that qualification via their job or another organisation and can prove that carries over, because we're just conscious that having done that qualification, it is very timely, and there are a lot of pressures on elected members anyway, and the priority should be to ensure that they have that safeguarding training and awareness, rather than have them sat in another 60 hours of online training, etc., that they've already done. So we need to capture that somewhere as we go through that, and I would suggest going initially as well via whips before it goes through the formal process would be a way to try and achieve that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that was a comment, I think, Ryan, rather than a question. Yeah. Okay. I have no other sort of questions. Indeed, I do. Kate.
Thank you. This might be a bit of a silly question, so apologies if it is. It was just around, I suppose, just the potential maybe for conflict in a scenario whereby you were delegating that professional responsibility to the Director of Adults Services in a personal capacity, should that scenario arise. And I assume not, and that you would have already considered this, but is there a possible set of circumstances or a scenario in which, if the Director of Adults were to be delegated that responsibility, that there may be a potential for conflict in terms of the discharge of the statutory duties in respect of children, were there to be some potential tension or I don't know what's the right word, but where in terms of the different responsibilities and obsessions of the two different departments.
Catherine, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. If I can take that, and then colleagues feel free to chip in as well. It's very hard to see how there would be such a conflict, I would say, first off. So for the reasons that Ed set out, I think it's probably quite reasonable that that post holder, potentially did take on that role in those circumstances. If, however, there was a situation that came to pass where the Director of Public Adults and Public Health did feel conflicted, then there are other post holders in the chain, I suppose, within that report going to GPC, who could be asked to act instead. So there are sort of substitutes ready to go if necessary. But I can't think of a circumstance where such a conflict could arise. But if it did, then yes, there would be a substitute in place.
Kate, who? Speak.
Sorry. We'd hopefully all act like one council, there are scenarios in the country where much smaller local authorities where it will be one person in charge of both adults and children's social care. They are social workers, a lot, you know, and in the majority, a lot of, so it doesn't matter whether they're adults and children. And actually, I work with transitions. I would hope that this council would always work as one in terms of, especially because nothing changes really when you turn 18, you know. So I'd hope there would never be that conflict, obviously, in the legal thing. And I have every confidence of the officers at all levels that they work together for the benefit of all our residents rather than seeing them in silos as children and adults.
Councillor Jenkins, did you? Sorry, Pete. Yeah.
So just to amplify, Chair, something that Councillor Hayden's made. Across the country, there are plenty of examples of directors of people, which are so-called twin hatters of directors of adult social care and children's social care. They work extremely well and they are completely legally sound. In terms of the scheme of delegation, whilst I am fully responsible, I clearly don't make every decision that is made in children's services, and nor would I want to. And I think the principles of how assurance works across adults is very similar to how the principles of assurance work across children, and therefore I would have every confidence in that arrangement.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins.
Okay, I've just got 2 points. One is that all councillors get a DBS check, and many of us are also school governors where we do get safeguarding training. So it might be worth collecting that information, particularly about safeguarding training in other places. My second point is, I do wonder if we get an estimate of the cost of the council meeting on the 19th of December, in the light of the fact that if we'd have waited another 2 or 3 weeks for Mr. Pettigrew's report, it would have shown that there was no need really for that meeting to have taken place. And it just seemed a very pointless political gesture.
Anyone? Are they just comments, Councillor Jenkins?
If I could reply on the safeguarding element of Councillor Jenkins' question. Yes, you're right. I have 4 DBS certificates sitting at home, but I'm quite happy to apply for another one when another setting wants. They are meant to be enhanced, so they are meant to be able to passport, but but they are only ever relevant on the day that they are checked by the police, and that lasts for 3 years, and a lot can happen in those 3 years. So I absolutely support every different governing body or my daughter's pony club camp, when I spent a night in a stable. I won't go into it, but I'm hopeless with horses, but I can look after children. So they wanted a DPS, absolutely fine. I'm very happy to do that, as am I happy to do as much safeguarding training as anybody wants me to, and I want to do, because things change, laws change. And the safeguarding training that you may get in one setting can be completely different to the safeguarding training in another setting. So I had lots of safeguarding training as a teacher in my 16 years of teaching. Clearly I did. Over those 16 years it changed, and we got annual safeguarding training. I welcomed it because, and also situations change, the needs of children change, their vulnerabilities change. When I was teaching, we didn't have knife crime like we do now. So, you need to keep updating that safeguarding training. We had no concept of risk outside the home. We had of all these different things that change in the way that we look after children and vulnerable adults as well. So I'm very much of the, but also when I became a counsellor and I became a corporate parent, and have responsibility for children looked after. That was completely different to any responsibility that I'd had not completely different. Obviously, I taught children looked after, children who looked after. But in terms of my role as a teacher, in terms of my role as a governor, as working in the parish, in my church, being a corporate parent for children looked after was very, very different. And I welcomed that excellent training that I've had several times over the years, led by Bernardo's. In terms of, because seeing life through the lens of a child looked after is very, very different and was very eye-opening for me and informative for me. And I'd welcome and I think it's necessary to have mandatory training, because whatever safeguarding training you've had in your professional role outside, and I've had a lot, it's not the same as being an elected member with responsibility for children looked after.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Shanaz?
Thank you, Chair. So the report does give assurance that duties under the Children Act are being met despite the financial pressures. However, for transparency, how equitable actually are we as a city? And what evidence do we have about the families that find it the hardest to navigate access statutory services? What proactive support is in place to prevent them disengaging or escalating later? And how is lived experience used to test whether statutory duties are not only met but experienced fair and accessible in practice? I think my fear is that if this isn't tested, savings can unintentionally reward those who are best at navigating the system rather than those with language barriers or have accessible needs. Thank you. And then just on the back of the safeguarding, with a youth work background, completely echo what you're saying. And in addition to that, I think we've mentioned earlier about contextualised safeguarding is really, really important. So if we can add that to the training element, because, you know, the whole context is really, really important. Thank you.
Anyone like to respond? Ed?
So thank you for the question. I think that question is probably best addressed by the service themselves, who can speak for the day-to-day what we're trying to do. But as sort of head of paid service and chief executive here, it's my priority, working with the DCS, working with Ben and others, that we have a service that is culturally sensitive, is equitable and genuinely inclusive. And we've done a lot as a council working on voice and influence in particular to bring the voices of children and young people into the service. It's something that Ofsted have helped us to make sure that it's in the right place and is working, and we're proud of it. But it's something that we will never rest on. So it is important. But I think in that specific question, that's one where, say, Ben, Pete, and others are best placed to address.
Thank you, Ed. Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points. One, to pick up on the mandatory training. Is it something that could be like put into a councillor's induction pack, so that when we get all our new councillors, it's a process that everybody goes through to make sure that we're all equipped to do our job as councillors and to have that duty. That's not necessarily for this scrutiny board as such, but I think it could feed into something else. That's point one. Point two, the existing system around making decisions. What should have been adequate with 3 people there, but with all 3 off, we've now had to put into place a lessons learned process, and that's in one sense it was unavoidable. You can't foresee these things happening, that you're going to have everybody off, but we need to be in a position to do so. And just looking through this, it raises the question, how far do you go? If you look on page 199 at 12C, it says authority for the chief executive to appoint an interim statutory officer. But what if the chief executive is on holiday or away? So do we then add into that the chief executive or his deputy? And, I'm just saying we really need belt and braces here, so that we don't come back here in, sometime in the future.
if I can just pick up that specific point, Chair, yes, that is precisely what is the GPC report intends to do in the event that Ed is unable to act for whether he's off or actually the head of paid service can't actually act as the monitoring officer in law. That's not possible. So in that situation, the proposal would be that the Deputy Chief Executive would act instead.
Thanks. It's just not. It was sort of inferred in 12B, but not actually specific in 12C. I think that would be useful to put that in. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have no more questions or comments. I think just in... Oh, sorry, Councillor Stevenson.
It was just on that point, actually, because it's a point that I raised privately with Kevin, that it's very difficult, isn't it, to paint the scenario of that sort of apocalyptic where everyone goes down, and because if you did, you'd sort of end up with the scenario where if you take out the senior people and keep going down, you might end up with a scenario where, you know, the office cleaner ends up appointing, you know, a new DCS or something when it all works down, which is, so you can only do what you can within the process, and I think I'm confident that that's what's coming forward to general purposes, notwithstanding some concerns around time frames, which we'll address there. The main bit really is to have the confidence and the assurance to us now that we thought the previous system was watertight because we had 3 deputies. The failure was when one of those was absent, we didn't do what we should have done, which is appoint the 3rd at that moment in time, because had we have done that, it would have avoided all this scenario when 2 of them went off. So the real assurance I'm looking for is, in the new system proposed, is the fail-safe in that would avoid that human error that took place last time in not reappointing a 3rd? Are we confident that the trail that it will follow is sufficient that we'll avoid the scenario where we run out of people?
Ed? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So that's our aim, is to create a watertight system. I think the two comments I'd make: in Colin Pettigrew's report, he talks about those sort of 33%, etc., sort of contingency planning and what would be triggered by that, and we've taken that seriously. We tried to incorporate that at paragraph 14A, where we're looking at how we're identifying key officer gaps and making sure that we have a process that's early identifying where there are gaps and risks, and then prompting those decisions and discussions to happen. You're trying to sort of shape sort of processes around people. My goal here is making sure that the right prompts are placed in front of the right officers at the right time, and I think that's what we're providing for here. But as I say, very happy to take sort of advice on how we can best reflect that. Catherine, Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I don't think I can add anything to that. Thank you, Ed.
Councillor Hayden.
Thank you. Just on the point of vacancies, and Catherine and Kev will be much more knowledgeable on this, but we don't have 3 vacancies. We have 2 people who are away from work ill. That's not a vacancy. So we have to, going back to the point about all councillors being informed, there is employment law that we have to adhere to, quite rightly, when somebody is off sick and is not well. That's not a vacant post, and nor should it be treated as so. Obviously, in terms of the statutory nature of that now will pass to a number of different people should the scenario arise. But in terms of informing all councillors that we have 3 vacancies, that's not and that's not what was put out. We have 1 vacancy and 2 people who are not well at the moment, and measures are being put in place until they return to work. But it would be remiss of me to inform all councillors about a person's employment status when they are still employed, and the delicate nature of people being ill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. I think the discussion today, and the very fact that the Chief Executive, City Solicitor and other legal colleagues are here, together with the extraordinary meeting of council last month is an indication of how seriously this matter was taken. It's sod's law, isn't it? It was a very unusual set of circumstances, but that's what happens in life. And if we eventually reach the right sort of conclusion, and it sounds very much as if we're almost there, if not quite there, I think it's not been a bad lesson for all of us in lessons learned, etc. So thanks very much indeed. We move on to the recommendations. To note and comment on the contents of the report, including the proposed actions to ensure the Council continues to meet its statutory duties in relation to Section 18 of the Children's Act in order to inform the Executive Board report. Could I have someone to propose that, please? Councillor Gabani, second? Okay. Yeah. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. Ed, Catherine and Kev, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come down today to help us out. Thank you. Cheers. Okay, if we then move back to item number 9, the performance report. Councillor Hayden, would you like to start again?
Very happy to. Thank you. So this is a performance report. So as I was saying, it brings together the latest performance information across education, social care and health, giving a clear picture of how the system is working for children at both the citywide and cluster level. There are encouraging signs across a number of areas. Attainment continues to strengthen. Attendance is also moving in the right direction. Leeds is now very close to the national picture, with persistent and severe absence both decreasing compared to the same point last year. And this reflects a strong partnership work taking place with schools, including support from the Department for Education on severe absence. And I'd just like to thank, we heard about it a couple of meetings ago about the work on attendance, and just like to thank everybody for their hard work on that. In social care, the number of children, as we've heard, continues to fall, looked after continues to fall, and also children on child protection plans. We've heard about external placements, and it's also worth noting, which lends to the discussion earlier, that while our local rate is stable, the national children looked after rate has increased, so we're bucking the national trend. I want to really acknowledge recent national recognition at the Children and Young People's Now Awards, with our Gypsy Roma Traveller team winning their category, which was fantastic. And the Youth Justice Turnaround team, which we heard about earlier from Ben, was shortlisted and highly commended. And it reflects the strength of practice across the Directorate, dedication of staff working with some of our most vulnerable young people. At the same time, the report is honest about the pressures we face. Demand for education, health and care plans continues to rise. We are responding through focused work through task and finish group and wider improvement activity, but we recognise that we are nowhere near where we should be with our EHCPs. We also know that outcomes for some groups, including pupils with SEND and those eligible for free school meals, remain far lower than we want them to be, and this continues to be a priority. Overall, the report reflects a system that's performing well, improving in key areas and responding proactively to areas of pressure. I'd like to thank all our staff and partners who are working so hard to make this happen, and for this incredibly detailed and brilliant report. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Chris Hudson, are you going to lead on this one? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out a few areas of the report, but not go through in detail before we move on to questions. So in terms of the attainment information that's in there, that's for the 2024-25 academic year. It's still an emerging picture because the data is released by the Department for Education over a number of months. What you have in there are the headline measures, the performance and the how Leeds compares to national and some of our comparator groups. that information is able to be broken down by school, by ward, and also by different pupil groups. We just don't have all of that information yet, so that is something to follow. But this board will receive later in the year the annual standards report that will give more detail behind the headline figures. The attendance data that we've put in there for comparative purposes covers the first 4 half terms of the 24-25 academic year. We've included some unverified in-year data that we collect just for Leeds, so I think that's at point 19 in the report towards the end of December, just gives a sense of where we are in the current academic year. We will, in the near future, we will have the full academic year data for 24-25. That's released with a bit of a time lag, so what you have in the report is the latest national one. The last point, I just wanted to clarify some information around the children looked after figures. There's a number of different figures in that report that come from different reports that we've included there to give context. The most recent figure in that report is for the end of November, and that was 1,497 children who were looked after in Leeds. The latest figure as of today is 1,463, so there's been quite a reduction in that from the end of November through to the end of January, and I just thought it was useful to have that figure in, because there has been a bit of a change in there, and obviously we will keep reporting that as it goes. Just to say on that figure before I finish, the current figure of 1,463, it's the lowest end of month figure we've had since June 2023. Where we'd seen a sustained rise from 2021 in our looked after figures, but since about May 24 that's slowly reduced. So 1,463, whilst that is still a large number, the lowest number we've seen, and reflects some of the conversations that you've had in previous items this morning as well. So I think at that point they were the key areas I wanted to highlight, but open to questions and happy to clarify any points around the information in the report.
Thanks very much, Chris. Do any other officers want to comment before we move on to question stuff? Right, thank you. Questions and comments from the members? Very quiet. No? Okay, must have been a very comprehensive report, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. We can move on then to the recommendations of the report. If we can find them. That the board consider and comment on the information contained in the report and appendices, noting the assurances provided, and considering if any additional information on further scrutiny work would be of benefit. Could we have a proposal for that, please? Seconder? Carolyn again. Thank you. All in favour? Any against? Abstentions? Again, carried unanimously. Thanks very much indeed, Chris. You got off quite lightly there, I think, towards the end of the meeting. Okay, moving on to item 11, which is the work programme. We did speak about this briefly in the pre-meeting. Basically, it sets out the work programme for the rest of the year. We covered next month's at the pre-meeting. If there's anything anybody else would like to mention at this stage, then please do bring it up. No? Okay. Moving on to recommendation. Members are requested to consider the board's work programme for the 25-26 municipal year. Could someone propose that one, please? Councillor Edwards. Seconder. Councillor Wilson. All in favour? All against? Any abstentions? Again, carried unanimously. All right, thank you all very much indeed. The next public meeting of the board is on the 16th of February, prior to the Budget Council meeting, of course. And I'd just like to say at the end, thank you all very much indeed. Very interesting meeting today, considering a lot of the information we got was very dry, financial type stuff. But You can't really talk about care without talking about money, unfortunately, although they don't correlate very well. So thank you all very much indeed, officers who've attended today. Really good session, I think. Particularly to Rob, who of course looks after us and all the rest of it. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Okay?